Well, we've been having a look at how badly Donald Trump has been handling the T virus outbreak in his own country. No doubt there have been updates since then, but I have no doubt that he is continuing to be a completely inept leader. However, we now travel back across the Atlantic to look at our own inept leader, the blonde bombshell himself, who is completely imploding during this crisis. Yep, we're on back to good old Alexander de Piffle, Boris de Johnson. I don't know why I just elongated his name like that. But yeah, let's not forget that his real name is Alexander. That is how most people refer to him, not Boris. Boris is just something that he himself cooked up as a PR thing to call him, then at least he sounds common. Just like, if you may remember, during the election, it came out about Rees-Mogg's sister, Annunziata. David Cameron said that she needed to change her name to sound more common. So, this is from The Guardian, and it's, when Johnson says we'll turn the tide in 12 weeks, it's just another line for the side of a bus. Britain, a nation of shop fighters, presided over a time of mortal peril by a newspaper columnist who has for 3 decades moonlighted as his generation's leading liar. Still, the words clawed onto the side of a plague pit probably once read, "We are where we are." But where currently is that? Is it a place where at 5 p.m. every day the disease-threatened populace is expected to take the prolific advice from Boris Johnson? From Monday, most British parents will be homeschooling their children. Not Johnson, of course. I imagine he doesn't want to break his own pledge on class sizes. The Prime Minister keeps saying that the forthcoming test to determine whether you have the T virus will be as simple as pregnancy tests, spaffing his whole sole area of expertise rather early in what is likely to be a long campaign. Actually, that's unfair. All of his other areas of expertise is disgustingly rather basic points which needlessly obscure language. This once made him a highly overrated prose stylist. Now it could make him an accomplice to the death of your relatives and friends. The key message on Tuesday is that people follow the advice seditiously. Seditiously, a signal for 10 million hard-working families to draw down their leather-bound thesaurus from their shelves and browse the synonyms for the word twat. The government's crisis communication strategy could not be going worse if it was led by the speaker of a dead language. With Typhoid Mary on the base, people are still clearly extremely confused by what the advice is. Never have bullet points been more called for, and you'd think someone as obsessed with the Second World War as Johnson would know that an effective Ministry of Information was inextricably linked to the success of the war effort. Unfortunately, as indicated, Johnson is basically just a columnist. I don't want to spaff what we might assume from my own area of expertise too early, but trust me on this. He is hardwired to spin that shit out for 1,500 words. How to put this in terms that will widely overeducate the Prime Minister can understand. Just tell us the information. It's public safety briefing, not a freaking ring quest. The government's inability to clearly define essential terms means that we are in a situation where self-isolating demonstrably means a range of things to different people. With social distancing, these urged is needed a simple but precise definition and a comms blitz everywhere from social media to news bulletins to short TV ads. Instead, Johnson prefers to chuck new soundbites on the pile. The current one is the pledge that we can turn the tide within 12 weeks. If you missed that clip, don't worry. My suspicion is that you'll be seeing it hundreds of times more by this year. It has a strong over by Christmas vibe to it, and it's the sort of thing that you can imagine on the side of a bus. There is something deeply unsettling to watch Johnson and Cummings' Brexit media strategy be lightly repurposed for a deadly contagion. The Prime Minister is already crossing the streams, declaring repeatedly on Thursday, "I'm very confident we'll get this done." Mate, that was your slogan for another one. We're about 3 days off from telling us that we can't take back control. Yet control is once again looking somewhat tenuous. Huge amounts of this week have been delegated to gaslighting the nation that last week no one in a position of power said herd immunity out loud, and yet they did. Meanwhile, Cummings, the high priest of the 20,000 word blog, can tell you everything about the Manhattan Project taught to us, but he seemingly can't work out that if you let a London will be immediately locked down story go viral for 18 hours before you deny it, then people will physically fight over bog roll. Nurses coming off 48-hour shifts will cry in videos because they can't buy anything in the shops. I'm guessing Cummings is interested in behavioural science in a way that I'm interested in Olympic figure skating, which is to say, I like it, but I'm unbelievably lethal at that shit. Physically, meanwhile, Johnson is aging, slightly quicker than the guy in the Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade who drinks from the wrong grail and goes to middle age to ancient to exploding skeleton in around 6 seconds. There seems to be an unholy symbiosis between him and Ricky Sahak, who appears to be growing younger with every appearance. Perhaps for that year that the Prime Minister gains, the Chancellor loses one a fortnight. So Suliak will require homeschooling, while Johnson will be over 70 and constantly allowed to self-shield from having to do his job. Of course, we are not the only nation to be conducting an interesting social experiment to demise what happens if you elect a clinical narcissist to run a country which later turns out to be facing grave danger. At this stage, the US's experiment appears to be going rather worse. You currently wouldn't rule out Donald Trump judging November's elections, but to something that had better be suspected under the circumstances. Even so, it has to be quite something to watch Johnson's boredom and terminal ironist smirk kick back live on air as this week he progressed, even while people are asking him about the soon-to-be break ventilator crisis in intensive care, Operation Last Gasp, as Johnson reportedly called the need to address the equipment deficit in a conference call to manufacturers this week. What can you say? If there were a kind of movie justice, the key component for the T-virus vaccine would occur naturally only in Johnson's brainstem. Alas, even that eventuality, he declined to do it to do the right thing for the greater good. Johnson is never at a single point to suggest that he's got into the game for public service. The idea of heroic sacrifice is allowing someone else to raise his offspring. That the music should stop when Boris Johnson, of all people, is Prime Minister is the darkest, most comic of ironies. We are being asked to put our lives in the hands of a man whose entire career, journalistic and political, is being built on a series of lies. It is the work of seconds to dredge up Johnson's columns about radical population control, or Johnson's buses about the NHS enjoying vast savings from the EU. Who knows which of these, if any, he really believed? Time and again this week I have been reminded of the last great line from last year's Chernobyl drama series. When the truth offends, we lie, and we lie until we can no longer remember, even if it is even there. But it is still there. Every lie we tell incurs a debt to the truth. Sooner or later, that debt is paid. And as the same thing for all these things for Johnson, he is right. Every time he lies and goes on air and tells lies, even not something related to the T-virus, there you go. There's no way you can get around it. Johnson's debt is coming due, and it looks like that he's about to be called.